Announcements. I think we met last year when we launched Red Hat Storage.
Yeah.
And so the 12 months have been phenomenally good, both in terms of customer traction, both in terms of partner traction. But if you remember last year, right, I think what we talked about is for any of these open source projects or products to be successful, there are kind of three very key ingredients. One is the community. The other is the product itself. I mean, it's exactly what it's supposed to do. And the third is the partner ecosystem. What we've done with the Gluster community itself is taken some real, what I would call deliberate yet very good steps in ensuring customer-driven innovation. Right. So there were two things that we did over the last few months that kind of culminated as part of the Friday announcement. One is that we expanded Gluster.org to be more of a nexus or a hub for not just the Gluster project, but ancillary projects that have can be tied into the Gluster project, right? So under the name of a Gluster Forge is the name of the project. So it's not just around Gluster FS, but there's a variety of things that tie into Gluster and how we can continue to innovate, much like the Fedora. So our ultimate goal is we want to make Gluster.org to Red Hat Storage what Fedora is to RHELM. So people can view all the innovation that's going on upstream, the ability to predict the future, if you will, in terms of what's going to be available in Red Hat Storage downstream. So that is one announcement. The other announcement around the same community is we've kind of broadened the scope where there's a governance board around Gluster, and there are 6 partners, including Intel and University of Oregon or Oregon State. I don't remember the names of all these specific entities, but 6 entities have signed a letter of intent to be part of the Gluster community board. And in true to kind of the community nature, it's not going to be one company saying, hey, this is thou shalt do this. It's going to be more a collaborative effort in figuring out where we take the future of Gluster. Right. So last month we announced a relationship, but a project along with Mirantis and Hortonworks around a project called Savannah. So Project Savannah is essentially, and this is all under Apache open source, Apache community. So Project Savannah is essentially a way to orchestrate Hadoop workloads with an OpenStack. Okay. So from an end user standpoint, big data or Hadoop specifically could end up being the killer app for OpenStack. So now you have a converged storage, converged compute infrastructure, and you scale out as your nodes increase. And the big data lends itself very well to the private cloud model. Right? So anticipating that, we are working with Mirantis, who you know about, along with Hortonworks around Savannah, Project Savannah. What we are announcing tomorrow that you got a preview of is, alongside with Hortonworks in the Apache community, we are working on Ambari, which is the orchestration for Hadoop. And also Hadoop is the out-of-the-box Hadoop thing is HDFS specific, which is the Hadoop distributed file system. But alongside with Hortonworks, we are working on making sure that Hadoop workloads can be run on non-HDFS platforms. So, and Gluster FS and Gluster Red Hat Storage would obviously be a beneficiary of that, but there'll be other distributed file systems that are not HDFS can also benefit from it. And there was a lot of work that was going on over the last 3, 4, 5 months to make it happen, and tomorrow's is kind of the first step in the direction.
What's wrong with HDFS that it needs to go away, as it were?
Well, I think fundamentally, we can always talk about some of the features that are lacking, or that what our customers tell us is lacking, which, software. Anybody, you can always create features. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about that piece. But what customers are now facing with is that some of these Hadoop workloads go from dev to test into production. IT is now, being given the charter, okay, now manage these 10,000 servers or 50,000 or 5,000 servers running Hadoop workloads with a different file system, so whole new skill sets that need to come into play. Different way of provisioning, different way of disaster recovery, different way of management. And that's where I think, creating yet another silo is what users say, do I need another one? I got a silo for files, I got a silo for objects, I got a silo for block, now I'm going to build yet another silo. And so that's, the ability for something like Gluster or Red Hat Storage to give customers a unified approach to managing their data, whether it's files or objects or blocks or things like big data, is, I think, a huge advantage. On the product side, huge amounts of progress in terms of customer traction, not just initial proof of concept, but a lot of customers running production environments around Red Hat Storage. So we feel very good about the cadence that we are on over the last 12 months. What we announced today is, as part of Red Hat OpenStack, that Red Hat Storage works with Red Hat OpenStack on day one. So we support files, obviously, objects through the Swift interface, Cinder and Glance. So those are kind of the three interfaces into OpenStack, Swift, Cinder, and Glance. So we have support for all three. So whether it's objects, whether it's blocks, or whether it's files, or VM images that Glance uses, we have support for that.
Is there still work that needs to be done, or is it just because the OpenStack is just API, you just plug into the API and there's nothing else that really needs to go?
No, so there is work that needs to be done on the storage side, and there's obviously work that needs to be done on the OpenStack side.
Sure.
There's continuous work that needs to be done. So for the block Cinder interface, right, I think what we have today is good, but there's a lot more work that can happen on top of that. Even within things like Keystone, right, so which is the directory services equivalent. We have a plugin today, but there is things that we could add in terms of user level granularity, in terms of capacity, quota management, all those things that is available in Red Hat Storage today that we just have to yank it up so that we manage through something like a Keystone or any other management consoles. So we have a very, I wouldn't call it a roadmap, because sometimes people associate roadmap as, okay, when is it going to be available? This is more what I would call the innovation pipeline that's going on both within Red Hat as well as out of the community, and how to best make Red Hat OpenStack the best private cloud platform for Red Hat Storage, and make Red Hat Storage the best storage platform for Red Hat OpenStack.
Software? Yep. What is the software-defined storage story other than Hype, and how does that roll into, when we're talking in an OpenStack context, some kind of distributed network where there's software-defined networking, which is a little bit more real, where I need that storage that can move around with it?
So, I think we have two of the three pieces in kind of the utopian vision. Is you have a customer who's got one x86 box, right?
Yeah.
And they have compute, storage, and network all in one. You got all in one physical box. Could be multiple virtual machines, but all in one physical box, right? So that's where the intelligence, I think, gravitates from the hardware itself into the individual software pieces, right? So we have two out of those three things today, right? Which is compute and storage. And we've been associated with the Project Daylight, right, which is around the software-defined networking. So that is something that we will absolutely tie in with. But even if you take the software-defined networking out for a second, things like storage vMotion equivalent, which is how do you move your virtual machine, storage for one virtual machine to another virtual machine, all within the constraints of the same physical box. So with Red Hat Enterprise Virtualization 3.2, that's possible.
What do you see as the key challenge, as it were, at this stage of the maturity of the business? Is it evangelizing the product, as it were? Are there still technology challenges, or something else?
No, I think it's primarily, it's given that this is the first year of having the product in the marketplace, we've done really well. But that doesn't stop. We got to continue to evangelize. Innovation has to happen on the product side, but when we look at all the stuff that's going on upstream, we feel very comfortable about where the trajectory of the innovation is. From a business standpoint, it's today the product is, for majority of the geos, it's available primarily through a direct sales force. What we are in the process of doing is enabling the channels. 67% of our revenue comes from the channels.
Sure.
So we're in the process of, so that'll open up the aperture further so that we can reach a broader audience.